Welcome back to the Kobe Cement audio experience. In this episode, we're talking about what it takes to be a successful organization. And I wanted to give you some information on the things to focus on in your team, in your organization, in your life that will guarantee your success. I'm going to give you part one in this episode. We're going to talk about 7. So it's a quick, snappy little episode for you guys to go through. We'll talk to those 7 successful traits. Look out for episode 2, where we're going to cover off the remaining 7 traits of successful organizations, successful teams, because I really want to give you tactical areas to focus where you can implement and focus that will guarantee success for your team, your organization, yourself. So, welcome back to the Kobe Cement audio experience. Stay tuned. Okay, let's get into it. In this episode, we're really drilling down into the first 7 as part 1 of our series here, where we're talking about the traits of successful organizations. This is helping us to determine where we focus our attention and our work with the teams that we're working with here at Best Practice. It's really in terms of where our focus points are, whether we're working in our talent business, whether we're working in our next practice, our coaching business, whether we're working out in our business advisory and risk management business, doing management consulting. We're really starting to investigate, okay, well, where should we be focusing our attention? We can all get a bit distracted and maybe use, for example, industry standards or industry models to guide us. In this episode, I'm going to go through the 7 traits, or the first 7 traits of this series, to really give you the focus points. So what I wanted to do in this episode is just give you those points to execute on, stay focused on, and then that will lead you on a journey to success instead of trying to figure it out yourself. So if you've got your pen handy and some notes handy, or if you're going to come back and re-look at this video or re-listen to this particular podcast, please do so. So we've been looking in a couple of different areas where those categories are. The work that I'm talking to you today builds on the work of Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. This is an article by Finkelstein out of one of the universities in North America. You can check out the information on the Insights tab of the Best Practice website. I'll put the link to that in the comments or the description for this particular video or podcast, so that you can go straight to the article that I'm talking about on our website. But where I really wanted to start, I've looked at a whole bunch of different models in terms of success, and really where this discussion starts is category number 1, or element number 1, is culture. You can have a great organization, but without a vibrant culture driving the results, really what we end up with is a lack of motivation across our employees, and we have, in the short term, an unsustainable model, and eventually we will be dealing with chaos and disaster in a reactive sort of behavior. So focusing on great culture and really starting to think about what great culture means for you is the point that I want to draw your attention to. Now, every organization has culture, and it's not that we can say that we've got to go create culture, or we've got to go get culture for our organization. You've got a culture. For most of the organizations that I'm working with, coaching, mentoring, training, giving guidance to, or even certifying in our certification and registrar business, their culture is very reactive. It's one of chaos, and it's one of poor time management, poor productivity, massive inefficiency. That's a culture, and that's probably the first point that I want you to understand, is that if you were to ask your team what are the sorts of things that frustrate them, that's going to give you some examples of little behaviors and activities that are evident and incumbent in your organization, and you really want to be changing up a gear. So we want to be looking for how the team are working together and what a successful culture would look like. People like us do things like this, and it's the positive things you want to be doing instead of the negative things. If it's people like us really enjoy going to work, we feel motivated, we feel responsible for the work we're doing, we embrace the responsibility, we feel we're doing meaningful work, we can see the outcomes, we're getting rewarded for the outcomes, we celebrate our results. If that's the type of culture that you want to engender or enlist in your organization, well, that would be the focal points. And how would I measure that? I would measure that by the number of people that walk in and the first thing they do in the organization is check their email. So if you've got the majority of your employees walking in the morning and sitting down at their desk and checking their email, that's going to be a reactive culture, typically reactive. But if you've got the bulk of your organization and team members coming in and reviewing their productivity, to-do list, plan for the day, and then starting to execute on that, and instead of reading emails and responding to emails, they are creating and sending emails, then you're going to actually see a subtly different, well-organised, well-planned team that are executing. No different to a high-performance football team, whether they are in defence mode, they're being attacked by the other team. So you want to be thinking about going straight into an attack mode like a football or soccer team would on the pitch. It's kickoff, and we're straight in, and we're trying to hit our goals and achieve our goals instead of defend ourselves. So really that's probably the first place you can take your team. The second element, category, component to successful organisations or trait of successful organisations is a high level of an advanced customer service. Word of mouth referral for any organisation is like the holy grail of lead generation, if you like. And so high performance organisations, one of the traits is to be constantly focusing on customer service and really building that out. So attention to customer service should remain in your business plan and mission statement, and regardless of your operations or organisations that pay key attention to the customer's journey, exercise empathy in their communication. So we really want to be looking at what's the transformation and the customer-centric focus of our mission statement. So what's the transformation we want to see in our customers, and do we have a customer-centric focus on our customers in our mission statement? Now, a colleague of mine that I've been working quite closely with, Gary Vaynerchuk, in recent times, he's been providing me with some training. He talks about this concept, which is hiring is guessing, firing is knowing. And really attitude, it ties down and plays into, where we want to go with our organisation. Does the person really get what they want to do, get their role? Does the person that you're hiring or working with get their role? Do they want their role? Do they have the capacity to do their role? And there's nothing better than that sort of positive go-to attitude in terms of helping your organisation or hiring, the people that are going to fit well, the high-performance players in the team. So we can get into some more nuts and bolts here. Strategy is really important, and that's the fourth element that I'm talking about today. An effective business plan is, of course, a prerequisite for success. Planning out the stages. Now, yes, plans are going to change, and just because it's going to change is not excuse to not have a plan. And if we want to go from A to B, or we want to achieve a particular result, it's not about trying to achieve that particular result. It's about doing everything that it takes as a team to achieve the result. And that's what a plan is. A plan is saying, this is the result we want, and we're going to do everything that we can possibly do to get the job done and achieve that particular destination or outcome. But if we don't set out to take ourselves to a particular destination, well, then we're ultimately rudderless, guided, unguided in where we're going. So a plan is really about, this is the particular direction that we want to go. And the business strategy is about how we're going to deploy that. There's lots of different strategies to execute the same process. Even if we're going on a journey, and that's going to be predicated on how fast you want to do, how fast you want to get there. Walking to a destination, going very slowly, you're going to get a very detailed look at the landscape that you're traveling through. If you go on an aeroplane, you've got a very bird's eye view of the landscape, and it's not going to be a really in-depth experience. So that's something I want you to consider in terms of business strategy. Finkelstein goes on to explain that a simple one-page document will do. But it should be well thought out and well executed. A poorly crafted business plan that's well executed is far superior to a well-crafted business plan that sits on the shelf and collects dust. I think that's a really valid statement. So here at Best Practice, we just run a one-page business plan. It's on an A3 sheet of paper. It's portrait, and we revise that every 12 weeks. We do 90-day sprints here at Best Practice to achieve our outcomes. We're right in the middle of the biggest sprint that we've ever done here at Best Practice, that some of you may or may not have seen, particularly if you're a new listener to our podcast. But that strategy really is saying we've listened to our audience, and they have said, yes, we love watching your videos, but we would prefer to listen to podcasts. So we move our material into a podcast platform. Now, what I just want to point out is that I have looked at some differing material, and I'm not going to sort of cite my resource right now in terms of, or note my resource that I'm looking to right now, but if I contrast the work of Finkelstein and what we've been writing about on our particular website with other commentators, I think that, we can get too mechanical or too detailed in saying, these are the 14 success factors of an organisation or the 14 high performance traits. Because the website that I'm looking at, which is an industry, industry source, it's really looking at, managing dependencies, end-to-end testing, focusing on user experiencing, There are people out there that are commentating on the traits of high-performance organisations without actually showing you the valid data that goes with this. So I think that while it's hard to fact-check the data, particularly with what's available on the internet, you've got to ask yourself, does this make sense? Is this something that I could work on? Okay, the next element's a really interesting one. We've labelled it discipline, but it's not discipline in the fact of, beating people with a stick. It's being disciplined in yourself. Pig-headed discipline to achieve the outcomes, the grit, the determination, the motivation to keep sticking at it until you've practice failed, and then eventually you achieve your outcome. And it's in the same way as a high-performance athlete would be training, or a toddler. I like to use the example of toddlers. My son learnt to walk when he was 10 months old, but he had been trying to walk from sort of 6. 6 months he was like crawling and climbing up on stuff, and it really took him 16 weeks to figure out how to walk. And in the context of children, he walked quite early. But it's that determined pig-headed discipline. This child, the minute he was born, he was desperate to get his legs moving. He could see adults up on his feet, and you could see that from sort of the age of 3 months. He was like something switched on, and he was ready to walk. The minute that he could walk, at the 12-month mark, he started jumping, and he spent a lot of time in his second year of life doing a lot of jumping, just up and down on the spot, when he was sort of between 1 and 2 years old. And it's that discipline, that grit, that determination to just keep people moving and keep your cells moving. And that is one of probably what I would argue the key traits is the discipline to just keep on at the strategy. 2 more to go is risk management. High-performance organisations and one of the significant traits of a successful organisation is risk-based thinking and a good risk management system. Now, here at Best Practice, we talk lots about the ISO standard. So the ISO standard, international standard for ISO 9001, quality management system or management systems for different types of risk. It's definitely high on the list of traits of high performance and successful organisations with good risk management strategies, because they're looking ahead for their blind spots, not behind for their blind spots. They're not waiting for things to go wrong to fix. They're looking ahead and saying, actually, preventative action. What could go wrong? What are we doing about that? Let's put some light strategies in place to minimise the consequences of stuff going wrong, or minimise the likelihood of it actually happening in the first place. And if you can think about likelihood and consequences ahead of time, you can minimise the likelihood by reducing frequency, for example, like the frequency of a particular task happening, or you can minimise the consequences of a particular task, and you start to work on the consequences. So most owners of organisations will take risks. Most leaders, business leaders, will take risks. But Finkelstein goes on to explain that they do so because they recognise the need for change as the economic climate changes, and they understand it's disastrous not to embrace change. So it's almost like this, things are going to change, things are going to come up, and we want to be ready for those things and thinking about those. So I have seen this myself, that the organisations who are not advanced thinking and looking to the horizon in terms of, well, what could potentially go wrong, the organisations that don't use evidence of their historical operations, so they don't look back into the last 3 months, the last quarter, the last 6 months, the last year, and say, well, what went wrong? What went wrong in our operations? Like stopping, pausing and saying, what went wrong in our operations? What were the things that didn't go well in the last 12 months? And what are we doing to prevent those happening again? The organisations that are not stopping to do their quarterly business review and think to the future and say, well, what in the future could go wrong? Could this thing that happened before happen again? They're the organisations that fail. So it's really, what I'm basically saying here is, in the context of risk management and risk-based thinking, you really want to be stopping, pausing and saying, okay, what could go wrong? Okay, the last of our 7 today is a financial roadmap. And we talk a little bit about high-level business models. We talk about cash flow management. We talk about the financial models, the sources of funding. So whether you're listening to this podcast and you're working for a profit-based organisation in the commercial sector, or you're looking at a government entity or a not-for-profit, the financial roadmap is important irrespective, because what brings us all together in the context of work is money. So we really want to be thinking about, what's the financial plan for the organisation? What money are we going to bring in terms of revenue, and what money are we going to spend? And at a very high level, that's a budget, but really thinking about the cash in and the cash out is an important thing in terms of about the plan. And then what is the proportion that is set aside for growth of the organisation or for the other stakeholders in the organisation. That's really something we want to be thinking about. So in a good organisation that's got a good financial roadmap, you really want to be sort of pausing the spending if the money's not in the door, and you really want to be constantly prioritising how you're going to spend budgets, or budgeted spending, if that makes sense, and unbudgeted spending. So financial roadmap, really important. Definitely one of the traits of successful organisations that sustainably grow and maintain their performance over a long period of time. Okay, so that's a quick wrap. Let me just quickly go over those again for you very quickly. The first topic was culture. The second one was customer service. The third one was attitude. The fourth one was business strategy. The fifth one was discipline. 6 was risk management. And 7 was financial roadmap. Okay, so look, that's just a quick wrap. I just wanted to give you a quick debrief and really talk about, I want you to be thinking about your team, thinking about your organisation. If you haven't reached out to me already, reach out to me on LinkedIn and hit the follow button or the connect button on LinkedIn. That's the best place to get me with a direct message. If you have a question for me, if you want to debate this, let me know in the comments. If you're watching this particular episode on YouTube, let me know in the comments, was this helpful for you, yes or no? Is it great to have these 7 areas to work on in your organisation to help with improvement? Let me know in the comments, yes or no. And what was your favourite part of this particular episode? Was there a particular area that really resonated with you? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you haven't checked us out on the podcast that we're running, we're on most of the podcast platforms now. Search for the Kobe Simmet Audio Experience. My name's Kobe Simmet. I'm the CEO here at the Best Practice Group of Companies. And if you turn on your notifications on any of those platforms, you'll see or hear from me right here next time on Best Practice TV. Bye for now.